Today, we're tackling something absolutely fundamental, price theory. It sounds maybe a bit dry, but honestly, it's the system running underneath almost everything, how stuff gets its value, from your phone to your coffee. We're looking at that core tension, that push and pull between demand and supply.
Exactly. And our goal here isn't just to give you textbook definitions. We want to get into the actual mechanics, understand how prices are really set. Because whether you're like haggling in a market or looking at big global economic policies, it all comes back to price.
So the basic idea of price is just what you pay for something, right? The money value, like $800 for a phone.
Precisely. That's the exchange value in monetary terms. And
Mhm.
price theory is the analysis of how demand and supply interact to arrive at that specific point, that $800 figure.
Okay, and looking through the materials, the first thing that jumped out at me was, well, we always hear about market forces. Supply meets demand, makes an X on a graph.
Right, the classic equilibrium.
But that's only one way prices get set. The sources list, what, 9 different methods?
Yeah, it's surprisingly varied. It shows you how complex things are out there in the real world. So number one is definitely market forces, the classic intersection point, the equilibrium price. You see that mostly in really free competitive markets.
Okay.
And kind of related, but more hands-on, is bargaining or haggling. Just two people negotiating until they agree on a price, face to face.
Makes sense. That feels very intuitive. But then there are methods that seem to take the negotiation right out of it, like fixed price offers.
Exactly. That's where an individual, or more often an institution, just sets the price. Take it or leave it. Think about your electricity bill. The price per unit is fixed by the utility company, right? Or
Yeah.
just prices tagged on items in a supermarket. No haggling there.
Right. And then moving into the business world, especially where there are just a few big players, oligopolies.
Yes, that brings us to price leadership. It's really common in those oligopolistic markets. Essentially, one firm, maybe the biggest one, or the one with the lowest costs, sets a price, and the others just follow along.
So they just copy the leader. Why?
Well, it avoids messy price wars, keeps things stable. It's often just easier and safer for the smaller firms to follow the leader than to try and undercut them and risk a big fight. That's the dominant form.
Okay. And what if they don't just follow but actively agree?
Well, that's collusion. It's usually illegal, mind you. But it's where sellers get together, often secretly, and agree on a set price to limit competition among themselves. You might see it with, say, bus operators on a certain route, all agreeing to charge the same fare.
Right. To keep prices high for everyone. Sneaky. Now this next one sounds quite specific. Resale price maintenance, or RPM.
RPM is fascinating. Here, the manufacturer dictates the final price the consumer pays. Sometimes it's even printed right on the product, like postage stamps or maybe newspapers back in the day. The retailer isn't allowed to sell it for less.
But why would a manufacturer want to stop a retailer from offering a discount? Wouldn't that help sell more?
You'd think so, but there are strategic reasons. The sources point out a few key ones. First, it creates price stability everywhere that product is sold, no variation. Second, and this is important, it can protect smaller shops from being crushed by huge retailers who could afford to sell at a loss temporarily just to drive out competition.
Ah, I see. So it levels the playing field a bit for the little guy.
It can, yeah. And third, for you, the consumer, it saves time. No need to shop around or haggle. The price is the price.
Okay, that definitely shows price setting is way more than just a simple graph. Strategy, power, even legal constraints play a huge role. All right, let's switch gears slightly and unpack the demand side of that fundamental equation. The key thing here, economically speaking, is that just wanting something isn't demand, is it?
Not in price theory, no. Demand specifically means the desire for something plus the ability and willingness to actually pay for it.
So dreaming about a yacht is just desire. Having the cash and being ready to buy it, that's effective demand.
Precisely. And that leads us straight to the bedrock principle, the law of demand.
Which we all kind of know intuitively. If the price goes up, people generally buy less. If the price goes down, they buy more. Simple inverse relationship.
Assuming, of course, ceteris paribus, that famous phrase meaning all other things being equal or held constant.
Right. And this law is why the standard demand curve slopes downwards from
Yeah.
top left to bottom right on the graph.
Yes. But why? Why do we behave like that? Why does a higher price make us pull back? It's not just automatic. There are reasons rooted in how we think and make choices.
It's the psychology behind the purchase decision.
Exactly. Reason number one, and maybe the most fundamental, is the law of diminishing marginal utility, or DMU.
Okay, break that down.
It just means that as you consume more and more units of the same thing, the extra satisfaction, the marginal utility you get from each additional unit, starts to fall. Think about eating pizza slices. The first one is amazing, right?
Mm.
The second is good. But by the fifth slice, maybe not so much satisfaction.
Right, you're getting full.
So if your satisfaction is decreasing with each extra unit, you're only going to be persuaded to buy that next unit if the price is also lower. It has to be cheaper to justify the smaller kick of satisfaction.
Ah, okay, so that explains bulk discounts essentially. Buy more, get it cheaper per item because your utility for each extra one is lower.
That's a perfect practical example. Retailers understand DMU. The second reason is the substitution effect. When the price of something falls, say your preferred brand of coffee, it suddenly looks much cheaper compared to its substitutes, maybe tea or other coffee brands.
So you switch.
You're incentivized to switch away from the now relatively more expensive alternatives and buy more of the cheaper coffee. You substitute towards the bargain.
Makes sense. And the third one, the income effect.
Right, or sometimes called the real income effect. This is a bit different. It's not about switching. Imagine your actual income, the money you earn, stays the same, but the price of something you regularly buy, say gasoline, drops significantly. Well, even though your paycheck hasn't changed, your real purchasing power has gone up. Your money now stretches further. You can afford to buy the same amount of everything else and more gasoline, or more something else entirely. That drop in price effectively gives you more real income.
I see. So lower prices make your existing money feel like more money.
Exactly, and that allows you to buy more. So those three, diminishing marginal utility, the substitution effect, and the income effect, are the pillars supporting that downward sloping demand curve for most goods.
For most goods. But economics loves its exceptions, doesn't it? The source material talks about abnormal demand curves where this whole relationship flips.
Yes, where the curve actually slopes upwards, it seems totally counterintuitive, demand more when the price goes up.
How does that even happen? Must be about showing off, right? Status symbols.
That's a big one. Articles of ostentation or luxuries. Think Veblen goods or conspicuous consumption. Supercars, designer fashion, rare art things brought by the wealthy, often because they are expensive. The high price tag itself is part of the appeal. It signals exclusivity and status.
So if the price dropped too much, it would lose its appeal.
Precisely. The snob effect wears off if it becomes too accessible. So higher price can actually mean higher demand among that group.
Wow. Okay, so that's the snob effect.
Yeah.
But then there's the complete opposite driver. Poverty. With Giffen goods.
Right. Giffen goods are a very specific, rare type of inferior good. They have to make up a huge chunk of a very low-income person's budget. Think maybe a basic staple food like maize or cassava in certain really poor regions.
Okay, so what happens?
Here's the twist. If the price of that basic Giffen staple increases, the household becomes so much poorer in real terms that they can no longer afford even small amounts of slightly better, more expensive foods, like a tiny bit of meat or vegetables.
So they're forced to cut back on the luxuries.
And they have to spend that freed up money buying even more of the basic Giffen staple just to get enough calories to survive. So paradoxically, a price increase leads to a demand increase for that specific good.
That's quite a grim economic reality.
It highlights the extreme constraints faced by the very poor. Then you also have exceptions driven by speculation. If everyone thinks the price of, say, houses or a stock is going to skyrocket next month, they might rush to buy more now, even if the price is already high, to get in before the expected bigger rise.
Buying high because you expect it to go higher.
Exactly. And finally, sometimes it's just plain ignorance. A consumer might see two similar products, one much more expensive than the other, and just assume the pricier one must be better quality, even if it isn't. They buy the expensive one out of ignorance.
So the exceptions are just as fascinating psychologically as the rule itself. Status, poverty, expectations, lack of information. Okay, we understand the direction of the demand relationship, usually down, sometimes up. Now let's talk about the intensity of that relationship. How sensitive is demand to price changes? This is elasticity, right?
That's the core idea. Elasticity measures the responsiveness, the sensitivity of one variable to a change in another. We're focusing here on price elasticity of demand, or PED. It tells us how much the quantity demanded changes percentage-wise when the price changes by a certain percentage.
And knowing this, whether demand is sensitive or not, seems crucial for anyone setting prices.
Absolutely vital. For businesses, for governments, for understanding consumer behavior. We basically categorize it. If demand is inelastic, the PED value is less than 1. This means even a big change in price leads to only a small change in the quantity demanded. People keep buying it, largely regardless of price.
What kinds of goods are typically inelastic?
Think necessities like basic salt, or addictive goods, cigarettes, certain medications, or things with strong complements like gasoline for a car you already own. You need it, you'll pay for it within reason.
You're kind of locked in, so what's the opposite?
That's elastic demand. Here, the PED value is greater than 1. A small change in price causes a big, disproportionate change in the quantity demanded. People are very sensitive to the price.
And these would be things with lots of alternatives.
Almost always. If a particular brand of soda raises its price even slightly, and there are 10 other similar sodas right next to it, consumers will likely jump ship in large numbers. Lots of close substitutes means high elasticity.
Okay, elastic versus inelastic. Got it. And this elasticity concept connects to something called consumer surplus.
It does. Consumer surplus is a really neat idea. It's the monetary measure of the benefit you get when you pay less for something than you were actually willing to pay.
Like getting a good deal.
Exactly. It's the difference between your maximum willingness to pay, which is related to your expected utility or satisfaction, and the actual market price you did pay. The source gave a good example. Say you were prepared to spend $900 on 4 units of something because you valued them that highly, but the market price was only $600 for those 4 units.
So you saved $300 relative to your maximum valuation.
That $300 is your consumer surplus. It's real economic welfare you gain from the transaction.
Nice. Okay, so understanding elasticity helps us see consumer benefit. But why are producers and governments so obsessed with whether a good is elastic or inelastic?
Because it fundamentally shapes strategy and policy. For a producer, it's all about revenue. If your product has elastic demand, people are price sensitive, you generally maximize revenue by lowering the price. The increase in sales volume will be proportionally bigger than the price cut, boosting total revenue.
Okay.
But if your product has inelastic demand, people aren't sensitive, you maximize revenue by raising the price. People will keep buying almost the same amount, so the higher price brings in more total revenue.
So pricing strategy depends entirely on how consumers react. Makes sense. And for the government.
Taxation, I assume.
Taxation is a huge one. If a government wants to raise revenue efficiently, it's much more effective to tax goods with highly inelastic demand. Think taxes on gasoline, alcohol, tobacco. People grumble, but demand doesn't fall off a cliff, so the tax revenue keeps rolling in reliably.
Right. Taxing something super elastic would just kill the market and generate no revenue. Exactly. And related to this is tax incidence, basically. Who actually ends up bearing the burden of the tax? Does the consumer pay it all? Or does the producer absorb some of it?
And elasticity determines that.
Largely, yes. If demand is perfectly inelastic, a vertical demand curve, the consumer pays 100% of the tax through a higher price. They have no alternative. If demand is highly elastic, the producer has to absorb most of the tax burden themselves. If they try to pass the full tax onto consumers via a higher price, their sales will plummet. They have to eat the cost to stay competitive.
Fascinating. So elasticity even influences political debates about tax fairness.
Absolutely. And it affects other policies too, like deciding whether to devalue a currency or which industries might need regulation because they provide necessities with inelastic demand, what we often call public utilities.
Which brings us back nicely to the big picture.
Oh.
The price mechanism. That idea of the invisible hand guiding resources in a free market based on price signals.
Right. In theory, prices automatically tell producers what to make, how to make it, when, where, and for whom, all driven by consumer demand and producer costs. It promotes efficiency in a technical sense.
It's not perfect, is it? Why do governments feel the need to step in and interfere with prices?
Because the pure price mechanism, left completely alone, has some major drawbacks. While it can be efficient, it can also lead to monopolies exploiting consumers because profit is the only motive. And crucially, it completely ignores things society cares about but that don't have a direct market price.
Like pollution or public parks.
Exactly. It ignores those negative externalities, the social costs like pollution or deforestation, and it fails to provide public goods, things like roads, national defense, clean air, because you can't easily charge individual users for them, so there's no profit incentive for private firms to supply them.
So the market fails in certain areas, creating a justification for government intervention, like price legislation, setting price controls.
Correct. 2 main types here. First is the maximum price, often called a price ceiling. The government sets this below the natural market equilibrium price. The goal is usually to protect consumers by making essential goods like basic foods or rental housing more affordable.
Sounds good in theory, but what's the catch?
The inevitable downside is shortages. At that artificially low price, quantity demanded skyrockets, while quantity supplied plummets because producers find it unprofitable. This leads to queues, rationing, potentially black markets where the good is sold illegally at a higher price, and it discourages future production.
Okay, so ceilings cause shortages. What about the opposite? Minimum prices.
A minimum price, or price floor, is set above the market equilibrium. The classic goal here is to protect producers, ensuring they get a decent income. Think agricultural price supports or minimum wages.
And the downside there.
Surpluses. At the artificially high price, producers are incentivized to supply more, but consumers demand less. This leads to excess output that someone, usually the government, has to buy up and store, which can be very costly. Think butter mountains or wine lakes.
Right. So interfering with prices has real, often unintended consequences. Wow, we've covered a lot. From how prices are set way beyond just supply and demand through bargaining, leadership, collusion, to why we demand less when prices rise, utility, substitution, income effects, and the fascinating exceptions like giffen goods and luxuries. Then into elasticity and why it matters so much for businesses and governments. And finally, the limits of the price mechanism itself.
It really shows that price isn't just a number. It's a complex signal shaped by psychology, market structure, strategy, and government action. And maybe one final thought to leave you with, something that highlights the inherent instability sometimes, especially in markets with time lags. Have you heard of the cobweb theory?
The cobweb theory. No, what's that? Sounds messy.
It kind of is. It explains why prices for some goods, particularly agricultural products, can fluctuate wildly around the equilibrium point. It's because there's a time lag between the decision to produce, planting a crop, and the actual supply hitting the market, harvesting it.
So farmers base their planting decisions on last year's prices.
Exactly. If prices were high last season, everyone plants more this season. That leads to a huge supply glut, which causes prices to crash. Then, seeing the crash, farmers plant much less the next season. That leads to a shortage, which causes prices to spike again.
So they're always reacting to old information, chasing their tails around the equilibrium price?
Precisely. It creates this oscillating pattern, like tracing a cobweb on the supply and demand graph over time. This inherent instability is often why governments intervene with things like buffer stocks, buying up surpluses in good years and selling them in bad years to try and smooth out those wild, time lag-driven swings.
It just reinforces the point. Prices are dynamic, constantly adjusting, and influenced by everything from our basic psychology to the time it takes to grow a potato. Really makes you look at the world differently. Thanks for diving deep with us today. Keep that elasticity lens handy.